Welcome to Touchline Talk by Soccerspective, the podcast that dives into tactical insights from the world's greatest soccer managers. I'm your host, Brandon Faust, and today we will be diving into the career of David Moyes and taking a look at his return to Goodison Park as he just took over for the second time Everton. We want to say thanks for jumping into this episode of Touchline Talk by Soccerspective. We have a vast video library we'd love for you to check out. We want to make sure that every time we release new content, you get it immediately. So hit that like, hit that subscribe button here. What that helps us do is expand our footprint while giving you an update every single time we come out with a new resource or video. So hit that subscribe button for the Soccerspective YouTube channel. On January 19th, 2025, Everton secured a 3-2 victory over Tottenham at Goodison Park, making David Moyes' first win in his second tenure as Everton manager. And 3 games back in the league, they lost to Villa and then came back and beat Tottenham 3-2. And then just recently, on a penalty, defeated Brighton 1-0. So they have almost half as many wins as they did all season under Dyche, under Moyes in 3 matches. In the first half of this match, we saw dominance from Everton that we don't typically see. They delivered a commanding performance, up 3-0 in this match, while Spurs still had 65% possession over the entire game. In the 13th minute, DCL, who's battled injuries a lot of his career, Dominic Calvert-Lewin opens the scoring, showcasing his footwork in the box and his ability to finish, as he puts it, into the corner. The 30th minute, Njai doubled the lead with an impressive individual effort, advancing into the area and finishing past the goalkeeper. And then in stoppage time, towards the end of the first half, an own goal by Tottenham's Archie Gray, who inadvertently redirected a header into his own net, extends Everton's advantage to 3-0 at the break. Goodison was rocking. David Moyes back in charge. It was just like the good old days. And like I said, Everton only had about 35% possession during the match. They're playing their counterattacking style, making the most of their chances. Spurs did get back into the game, a response by Ange's side as Kulusevski put one in the 77th minute, and then in injury time, former Everton player Richarlison scored against his old club, bringing the score 3-2. Everton escapes with the victory. And despite Tottenham's late efforts, Everton's early dominance, big 3-0 lead, secured them 3 points. And this victory was particularly significant for David Moyes, marking his first win since returning to manage the club. So David Moyes, he loves, and we saw it on display in this Everton Spurs match, compact defensive shape, pressing strategy, a lot of organization, and then using counterattacks effectively with DCL, with a strong attacking, goal-scoring center forward, leading the line, set up in that 4-2-3-1 formation, which we've come to know under David Moyes. And Everton's hoping to pull out of that relegation scrap and 2 back-to-back wins, this first one against Spurs, and then shortly after with the 1-0 squeaking out of a victory with a penalty, beating Brighton. David Moyes, his history, his career, you may have known his time from his significant fall-off at Manchester United, his rise at Everton, and resurgence even with West Ham. But it all started at Preston North End, how he built a winning mentality at Preston before earning the Everton job in 2002. And then he transformed Everton, took over an Everton side that was struggling near relegation, developed a disciplined, hardworking squad with limited financial resources, and led Everton to a top 4 finish in 2004-2005, which was wild, unprecedented, securing Champions League qualification. And he built that team around players like Tim Cahill, Mikel Arteta, and Leighton Baines. Even the American goalkeeper Tim Howard had great success during his time at Everton. after that run of success for over a decade at Everton, Sir Alex Ferguson retired and handpicked David Moyes to succeed him at Manchester United, which was always going to be an impossible task to follow a legend. But the squad really struggled under David Moyes. And there were some lessons from his short tenure, and it shaped his managerial approach. And he found himself back on his feet as he landed at West Ham. He reinvented himself there, leading West Ham to consistent, fighting for places for European competition, built counterattacking play, a physically dominant side, using the likes of a Mikel Antonio, and emphasizing defensive structure. Some takeaways that we can take from David Moyes' career is, he was always building resilient teams. We're going to talk more about that and the success about mentality as much as tactics during his time, leading at Everton and even at West Ham. Wasn't always afforded the opportunity for the biggest, wages or salaries or transfer budget, but found a way to give them an identity to scrap through wins. Defensive organization, well-drilled defense, both at West Ham and Everton over the years, and then getting the most out of his players. Moyes consistently developed players that fit into his system, that knew their role within the setup that they were trying to play, and then adapting to challenges. He learned from his setbacks. And I think this is important whether you're coaching at the Premier League level or in European competition or a youth team, that your kids play on, is how do you adapt? How do you have a preferred style? And then how do you adapt and help your team adapt to fitting into those roles, to having success, to finding the right system for them, to weathering the storm, letting your principles kind of get into the ethos and setting the culture in a good way. And so there were teams like Everton who they maybe, didn't always play the most free-flowing football, but found a way to find their identity and to squeak out significant results that led them to being, in the top half of the table quite a bit. He built his reputation tactically as a disciplined tactical manager, of solidity, counterattacks, that kind of direct play when they get into attack, and an ability to maximize squad potential. Some of his core tactical identity is around that compactness, defensive organization, everyone pulling their weight, a structured shape, often using a low or a mid block to frustrate opponents, and the variation even between a low and a mid block tactically that would play mind games, even between a first half and a second half, how he'd adapt in that way. Defenders stay narrow and compact, force teams wide, and then would usually have larger center backs or a defensive mid, a good goalkeeper, so that when you force these teams out wide, they're crossing balls in, getting them off of maybe the style that they want to play, and they're able to take care of things in the air quite a bit as well. And then having disciplined pressing triggers rather than constant high pressing, the likes of a Liverpool and a Gegenpress and all those things over the years with the Klopp teams and now the Arne Slot teams, obviously a huge rival of Everton, the biggest, derby that we one of the biggest derbies that we often see in the Premier League. But what's amazing about it is I know there's a lot of flash and noise around high pressing, but even those pressing triggers when you are playing a mid or a low block are really, really important. Everyone knows the timing, how they're supposed to be, what shape they're supposed to be in. And you can actually, if you take like an aerial view, you can see the beauty actually of some of these shapes when you're watching a match. Now, also at the same time, it doesn't mean that they were always some anemic, unable to score attacking team by any means. They would utilize a target striker like a DCL at Everton, a Mikel Antonio at West Ham for hold-up play, right, as a target player, and then allow the counter to build off of that strength and hold-up play where those guys could hold off 1, 2, 3 players at a time, and then emphasis on quick transitions, winning the ball, countering rapidly, right? So they're sitting in this low block much of the game, and then boom, they hit them on the counter, and it's almost like the other team is stunned or shocked at what's happened. Heavy reliance on wing play, whether with fullbacks or wingers delivering dangerous crosses into the area. So similarly, often just like their center backs were pretty significant, physically imposing. Often the attacking players that Moyes has used, whether at Everton or West Ham, were big physical players like a DCL or Mikel Antonio, where you could serve a ball in, get a ball in the air, and it just kind of fit the definition of their style. This isn't necessarily the style you're going to see Pep play or Klopp play over the years, but this kind of pragmatic, practical style of play allowed for the likes of Everton and West Ham over the years under Moyes to be competitive and to be, fighting for European places year in and year out. Now, set piece excellence also often comes with this kind of idea of how can we, if we're sitting in a low block, how can we overemphasize our physicality on set pieces, both in the attacking sense and then also in defending. Tall physical players always seem to be a part of his recruitment and squads. You had the likes of, like, at West Ham, Thomas Souček, who's, one of the tallest players in the history of the Premier League, coming up to win aerial balls, and at times had great runs of form. Now, tactical systems used by David Moyes often was like a 4-2-3-1 that sat, there's 4-2-3-1s that can be a little more attacking, some that can be a little bit more sitting back, which was often the case, both at Everton and West Ham. And that kind of structure provided defensive stability with those two deep lying midfielders. Strong wing play with wingers and fullbacks delivering in crosses. And then the striker plays a focal point and often supported by a creative link-up, quick transitioning ability to counter maestro number 10. At Everton, some of the key players under these systems were remember Fellaini? Man, that guy was so tall, played for Belgium, played for Manchester United for a while. He was a key player, aerial attack, both, to score goals, heading in goals, as well as defending. You had Cahill, right, who could pop up and kind of be that creative maestro, whether as a 10 or a striker or like some sort of attacking mid. You had a Leighton Baines, on the outside swinging balls in. At West Ham, you had the likes of, Declan Rice, right? Declan Rice is a holding midfielder. He's like 6'3" or 6'4", could clean balls out of the air and also pull the strings as well. A Thomas Souček, a Jared Bowen, as a winger or a 10, and the link-up player as a striker, and then, playing off a player like a Mikel Antonio. And a Mikel Antonio is so physical, so if you have a player like a Bowen running off of him, it could be really, really dangerous. At Everton, the blueprint was really about building a hardworking, defensively sound team on a limited budget, maximize set pieces and wing play through players like Baines and Pinar, used that deep midfield pivot to control games, to give them some solidity, to slow the pace down, and also to speed it up in counterattack. And his notable achievements while at Everton were a top 4 finish in 2004-2005, and the FA Cup final, reaching that in 2009. Now at Manchester United, 2013-14, it was a real struggle. Now Manchester United's struggles have been well documented relative to the Sir Alex Ferguson era. He attempted to implement his Evertonian principles, but struggled with squad adaptation. You had these big superstars, some towards the end of their career, and then new players coming in, and to buy into this kind of pragmatic system didn't really seem to work. He relied on crosses and direct play, which didn't suit United's attacking DNA very well. Failed to command authority in the dressing room, kind of lost the locker room pretty early. And you had players who were used to the likes of a Sir Alex Ferguson in his way. Some more attractive football, if you will. And then they brought in other players that just didn't seem to pan out or to fit in the system. Moving on to his time at West Ham, in 2017, 18, and then 19 through 23, it was reinvention of himself as a coach, adopted a defensive counterattacking style, securing, strong places in the table as well as some European finishes. Key signings like a Thomas Souček, Jared Bowen fit his philosophy perfectly. Jared Bowen could play that role to be the creative maestro, to create chaos. Souček, Declan Rice to create solidity in midfield, and then using Mikel Antonio as a lone forward in a physical counter-attacking system. Not only was Mikel Antonio physically imposing, but he's fast. He can fly. They won the UEFA Conference League in 2023 and saw that European title success, which is kind of like the third tier type European tournament, but still a massive, massive accomplishment for West Ham. And now, as of January 2025, he is back at Everton. More pragmatic than before, limited squad, lots of injuries on that team right now, and combining structured defense with quicker transitions, emphasizing, he's going to have to raise up and integrate some of these young players, find squad balance. And this 3-2 victory over Spurs on January 19th showcased their pressing intensity, counterattacking precision, and effectiveness in front of goal, right? Obviously, there was a little bit of a let-off towards the end of the match, right, and some of the defensive woes that Everton has had. But you have the likes of a Jordan Pickford back there. They do have some, physically imposing sized players, and can he get them to move off of Dyche ball to Moyes' system? Can they get any other players in the door before the end of the transfer window? But they're off to a good start. They're the loss against Villa, which, Villa is a strong team, good players. But then bouncing back with, back-to-back wins, right? Everton now has 5 wins on the season, and 2 of them have come from, David Moyes. 2 of them are from David Moyes' first 3 matches in charge. So obviously he's somebody who's knows the Premier League, got experience, has had success with these kind of gritty, blue-collar type clubs, in Everton and West Ham. And so Everton said, it's a familiar face. Let's bring him back. There's been a lot of changes at Everton and with ownership transitions and all of that. So bringing in a stable voice, a person who knows the style they want to play, and let's see if they have the tools to put on a strong finish and bring Everton to safety. Lessons I think we can learn from David Moyes, whether as a fan, whether as a youth coach, amateur coach, whatever it might be, is the importance of defensive discipline. I know everybody likes free-flowing attacking football. Everybody wants to be possession-based. Everybody wants to be the next, Pep, where you put 36 passes together on a 7-a-side team or something like that. But there's something to be said if you don't concede goals. A well-drilled defensive shape is the foundation of success for Moyes' teams. And I think even teaching your players who might be great attacking players, how do they develop holistically? How do they learn how to defend? How do you put them into spaces and places where they can succeed, but also try to be in positions they haven't been in before? You may have a great attacking player. See what they can do as a wing back. You may have a tall kid and man, they're just or a physical kid, and you need to put them at center back and see what happens in a match, right? As well as set piece efficiency, right? Dead ball situations can win games. At any level, at the highest level, you can find a game that's, dreadful. It's 0-0. But one set piece at the end of the match can be the difference. Just one kind of, spending a little bit more time and attention on something, having some sort of scripted options, which Moyes teams have done well, and then adapting to squad strengths. I think this is a lesson he learned at Manchester United, is he wanted them to play his style, but their attributes and strengths were suited for probably something a little more free-flowing, attacking, build-up type play, as opposed to just crosses in the box and really physical, grind-out games. And so how do you adapt to your squad strengths? That doesn't mean give up on your convictions or your philosophy, but how do you adapt that? How do you change the shape? How do you put players in positions of success to let them have the freedom that they need? And then he has found a way to maximize, an abundance mentality with limited resources. And a lot of times if you're coaching youth football, you may not have even good pennies to train with, or the right cones, or this or that, or the best warm-ups, or all the resources on that. But how do you work within the constraints? I think he's had a lot of constraints, especially at his time, his first stint at Everton. And how do you keep that positive attitude? How do you keep the locker room? How do you keep the culture positive? And it'll be interesting to see how this goes, right? Because inevitably there will be a tough run of form. Are they going to hang their heads as an organization? Is he going to lose the locker room? Or is he going to be able to create a culture quickly and restore a culture quickly, that even though there's constraints, limitations, to keep that positive and keep, a healthy culture rolling down the road? So final thoughts, David Moyes, he's a master of resilience. He's maybe not going to go down as one of the greatest managers of all time historically, but I think for, that kind of mid-range type club, or clubs that are struggling, he has a way to creating a sustainable path for them to improving, to being mid-table, and to competing for, those European places. He's a master of resilience, defensive tactician, structured, pragmatic, while not always flashy. His ability to build well-organized, physically dominant teams has kept him successful at one of the top leagues, or the top league arguably in the world, in the Premier League. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens the rest of the season. It's great to see his face back on the, I think he's great for football, to see him back on the touchline. And that's the story of David Moyes. And we'll see what the story of Everton looks like as the transfer window ends here and what happens in the second half of the season. And we want to say thanks for joining us on this episode of Touchline Talk by Soccer Perspective. Stick around. Check out the rest of our video library. We have great coaching resources. We have great resources for fans, great resources about different managers. Check out the different things that we have going on. Subscribe and like the Soccer Perspective YouTube channel.